Here now, Marcel came. Who am I missing? Stacy? No, Stacy. Heather? Oh, Heather says she's going to be coming. She got it. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Oh, sent the code? Oh, just a minute. Lily? Yeah, Lily's here. Yeah. Janelle's going to follow along. Haley's here. Myrna. Amber? Is Amber quit? I'm seeing her. Liz, Bernadette's here. Where's Bernadette? Oh, yeah. And Steve, do you know, did Steve quit or? Haven't seen him? Okay. Anyway, okay, so we're going to basically now, I've introduced you to the sort of the four main technology areas that I want you to use for this class to develop a lesson, right? So we're looking at different things that support collaboration, different web-based tools that support collaboration, the podcast, the map, the online interactive maps, the videos. So I want you to create, as we've talked about this, create lessons to use each one of those technologies to deliver a lesson from the Manitoba curriculum. And specifically one lesson, one 50-minute lesson where you've gone through the curriculum and you've drilled right down to the specific learning objective in a subject area and a grade level, and you've made a decision, made a choice of what lesson you want to teach and what technology you want to use to teach it. So we've got to do a few things. We've got to use the ICT continuum too to justify why I want to use this particular technology to teach this particular lesson. And as we've discussed, some things are better taught with video, or some might be better taught with podcasting. We were talking about some of the theories of learning there. For example, the learning styles. Well, learning styles is kind of we'll talk about theories as we go along today a little bit too, but it's a theory that's really untestable because we have really no way of getting right into your brain and being able to establish which thing that was it that made you learn that. Was it the thing that you heard, the thing that you read, the thing that you felt? We don't really have ability to test that theory. So we can't really call it a theory, but it's more of a heuristic device. It's something to kind of something to go by, something to kind of use as guidance for. We think it might be like this, but we can't prove it. So we know that we can present things on multiple channels, though. We can present them in a visual channel, which is mostly text. We can present them in an auditory channel, which of course is the podcasting. We can present things in a video format. So we're going to try and figure out a way to use the appropriate technology to teach a specific task or a specific subject area. The ICT Continuum, of course, is designed to talk about a few different things, though. They're talking about how to use ICT safely, responsibly. So one of the things when you're doing this too, you have to consider what do you have to plan for when your students use this technology, and to do that, to keep them safe, to keep them within the bounds of that learning continuum. So it all kind of comes together. Just said we want to, for this class, what I'm going to get you to do is create one lesson for each one of these modes. But recognizing that it's very seldom that we ever work with just one mode in the lesson. So probably in a lesson you're going to use, text, you're going to use some video, you're going to use some audio. There's going to be lots of crossovers. So you might embed video in a map. You might take a video of making a map. You might embed an auditory file in a map or in a video. So all these things kind of cross over and blur actually after a while, but we're going to try and see if we can keep them separate in one of those things. So again, as I said, we're going to plan lessons using MindMeister, and you've got a MindMeister map, and it should be linked at the top of your blog like this, and your map should show up like this. When I go to look for your lesson plans, this is where I'm going to look on your blog, on a page on your blog in a format like this. And I'm going to look for all 4 lessons on this one map. And I mean, you could make multiple maps, but MindMeister only lets us use 3 for free. So that's fine. And there's lots of capacity in that one MindMeister to make that work. We can always go out and look at the full featured map, which is what I'll do when I look at your maps. I don't want to look at it necessarily on the small screen, but I can look at a larger version of this, and of course manipulate all of the nodes. Even though you might not have shared it with me necessarily, I can still see what you've done on here. So for example, the maps lesson plan is the types of things that I'm looking for from the Manitoba curriculum: finding a subject area, finding a grade level, finding a unit, and then within the unit identifying a general learning objective, and then within that particular general or unit or whatever you want to call it, getting right down to a specific learning objective, what you would teach in one day's lesson. So that's what the size of this task that we're doing for this. Again, we're looking at the ICT continuum. We're always looking for cognitive objectives, of course. What content are you expected to learn? But also, we're interested in the affective component of learning. What is that again? The affective domain of learning. I'll wait. I'll wait while you Google it. Do it.
Giving people control of their learning?
That's part of it, yeah. Giving them a sense that they control their own learning, yeah. What else does it mean? The affective domain of learning.
Understanding and addressing how people learn.
Yeah, that's part of it. But more importantly, supporting people emotionally, I guess, is the basic idea. Convincing people that they have the capacity to learn, the empowering people, getting out of their way sometimes, but making them feel as if they're competent to learn, hopefully, eventually, independently. And that's the ideal state, is that when you're done with somebody, they've learned how to learn. They haven't learned stuff necessarily. The world is full of stuff. It's easy to find stuff, but how to learn is the trick. So you've demonstrated that. So affective components, affective objectives. How are you going to design this lesson to ensure your learners feel empowered to learn this particular lesson? We talked about Bloom's taxonomy too. What's Bloom's taxonomy? What are we talking about when we talk about Bloom's taxonomy?
Evaluate. Is it the 3 domains of learning? Remembering, creating, analyzing, applying, and understanding.
Yeah, it's the levels of proficiency, right? So at basic levels, when people are just new kids, younger kids, earlier years, we can't expect them to have the same cognitive capacity that we do of high school students or university students even, right? So this guy Bloom came up with this idea, is that when you plan lessons, you have to make sure that you pitch it to the right level, so that you're not designing a lesson that expects lower grade or younger learners who haven't developed the capacity to think at a certain level. You're not expecting them to do higher level work. So you've got to make sure that the task that you're expecting of them is appropriate to their age, often their level of cognitive development, sometimes their level of affective development too. So We got to incorporate that. So when you're planning a lesson, this is one of the things that you can consider. You can actually build it into your lesson. Say, well, I'm teaching this lesson and expecting people to learn to the, and all sorts of guides to Bloom's taxonomy. When you're creating a lesson, they talk about designing lesson plans and using different verbs. Your students will, and depending on what level of the Bloom's taxonomy you're aiming at, you can see, for example, if we're designing something for earlier years, where the only expectation was that the people understand what you're talking about, then you design your learning, your lesson plan, and incorporate verbs like students at the end of this lesson will be able to associate, compare, discuss, distinguish, differentiate, estimate, explain, express. So all these verbs kind of tell you what level this lesson is pitched at. And you can do the same thing whenever you're taking on anything too. You can tell what level this thing is pitched at based on the verbs that people use to explain it. So, whereas if you go up to the highest levels, this analyze, synthesize, these are the sort of what are considered the higher levels, which would be expected of you as university level learners, right? This is the peak. You should then be able to distinguish, examine, investigate, organize, outline, research, select, separate, simplify. All these things are tasks of the higher levels of the Bloom's taxonomy or learning domain. So when you're designing your lessons, these should be one of the considerations in there too. There's other ways of looking at this. They talk about Webb's depth of knowledge charts or Hess's cognitive matrix. All these things are different ways of looking at, but that same idea. What could you expect of your learners? And designing your lessons with appropriate expectations for your learners. So that's objectives. Then prerequisites, as we said, what did they need to know first? Before you started this particular lesson, what did they have to have done? Yesterday's lesson, probably. But also you need to consider some other things, goals, motivations, setting the context. How do you get people's attention? How am I going to get people interested in this lesson that I'm teaching? And sometimes that's very simple. It's, it's pretty obvious, but sometimes it's not quite so obvious. So you got to make sure people understand why it's important to them to learn this stuff. Same thing for resources. What are we going to use? What are you going to use to teach this lesson? What do your students have to have available to them when you're teaching the lesson? Do they need a computer? Do they need access to the internet? Do they need permissions? What resources do they need? What applications do they need? What data sources do they need? If they need inputs from someplace. Facilities, of course, and under resources, does your computer lab have access to the resources that you need to teach this particular lesson? So you need to plan that in advance. The people that need to be involved, again, mostly permissions, somebody else involved. What do we have to consider for that? So if you're interviewing somebody or again, with minor students, if they're under 13, do they have parental permission to use web-based tools? And if they're under 13, have you set it up so that you can use something like Google Classroom, where people under 13 can get a Google account? So, and then notes. As I said, this is probably one of the more important ones to you as you're planning this, because you're going to use this lesson hopefully on multiple occasions in the future. You want to know, did it work? Did I teach it? Did it go good? Did it work? Do I need to change things? What do I need to change? So we're interested in method of instruction, and there's lots of different ways that you can piece this too. We're going to start talking today a little bit about pedagogy. What's pedagogy? Good. I got something, information for you. And then method of evaluation, of course. In this particular lesson, this 150-minute lesson today, how I'm going to evaluate that. And we know that there's at least 3 different kinds of evaluation that we're always interested in. We're interested in diagnostic evaluation. We're interested in formative evaluation, so that people know how they're progressing, if they're progressing. And then we'll do a summative evaluation at the end to make sure that our lesson worked. So we'll incorporate each of those 4 things into each of these 4 lessons, depending on what application, what ICT format you're going to use. So for each of those, you will create what's called an exemplar, or an example of what you mean. So it could be something that you're going to use to explain to your students how to participate in this particular lesson. It could be an example of what you expect them to produce. It could be something that gives them directions. So what I'm going to get you to do, though, is put those each on an individual page at the top of your blog. So for example, the maps lesson, I want to be able to go to a link on the top of your blog and go find the map that you used or are going to use for this lesson, that you intend to as an example for this lesson. And same thing for the podcast.
So should we delete the podcast that we created in there for fun, or should we just leave it?
You can leave it, but when you're getting ready to present this, yeah, I should do the polished one. Yeah, just give me the one that's going to be the lesson that you intend. Same thing for the video lesson, and again, the collaboration lesson, whatever we're going to use, whatever your intention is to use for the collaboration lesson. So, and as we go along here, you'll see that, again, just about anything that we do, any of these things that we've done, whether that's a map or a video or most of these things can be done collaboratively. And that is sort of the power of ICT, or information communication technology, or social networks. That's the intention, is people work together. So most web-based tools, and certainly most of the ones that I promote in this class, are designed with the intention of people working collaboratively on things. Again, what's collaboration as opposed to cooperation, as opposed to competition? What's the difference? Yeah, working together to a common cause, to a common purpose, right? We have one common goal, we all work to that goal. Cooperation is we work together, but we have our own goals, our own individual goals. And then competition, of course, is we don't work together at all. We work in competition with each other towards our own goals. So most of the time, we don't need much training in competition. It's almost ingrained into our society. We live in a very competitive society. We live in a capitalist economy where competition is seen as sort of the highest value. Well, that's sort of true, but it creates some problem. Cooperation often happens, but what they've decided in our curriculum, in their wisdom, is that collaboration is sort of the highest state of affairs. So that's what they want. And they also recognize that people need to be taught how to do that, which also means that people need to know how to do that, how to work together towards a common goal. Yeah. So that's what the intention of this, when you design a lesson, how, first of all, examine yourself. How do I learn collaboratively? What has been in my experiences working collaboratively to do something? And then, again, looking at the Manitoba curriculum and figuring out which lessons in there could support the use of some sort of collaborative project to support the learning, to amplify the learning. And then what tool would you use? And again, as I said, just about any of these tools that we're talking about here, multiple people can work on them, especially the Google stuff, Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Spreadsheets. I don't know about video, maybe not quite so much, but drawings, of course, all of those spaces. MindMeister, we're going to do a little exercise using MindMeister collaboratively for this class. I'm going to get you to build your own multiple choice test for this class.
So when we do our podcast lesson, are we creating a podcast?
Yeah, you're going to create an example of a podcast.
We're going to create a podcast?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we have to make a lesson using a podcast or
No, you're going to create a podcast. I mean, practically down the road, yes, there's all sorts of podcasts, and I'm not really all that in favor of reinventing the wheel. If it's there, use it. If you have permission to use it, one of the things that we'll look at as we go along here is what's called open educational resources. And these are things that people have created, teachers have created, and shared with the intention that other people use them. So, but occasionally there comes up circumstances where you can't find anything, and it's easier for you to create your own. And actually, it's fairly easy to create podcasts, right, as we've discovered here. So I want you to leave here with the technical capacity to create a podcast, even if you never create one again. You should know how to do that and be able to do that. And you should be able to teach your students how to do it, because that can be part of their learning process too. Is, as I said, people learn through different channels. One of those channels is auditory, by listening. Again, the other thing about the podcast is that sort of gives you this thing that I was telling you that we valued before, this control that people need to have over their own learning. So if they can listen to a podcast and pause it and rewind it and listen to it when they want and review it as many times as they want, that gives them a sense of control. And again, that meets the criteria in the ICT continuum for, as we've described, giving them the affective, considering the affective domain in their learning. So anyway, we'll, as I said, we'll fool around, and I'm going to try and develop more things that support each one of these activities and give you some ideas. Again, there's no shortage of ideas. If you go onto things like Free Tech for Teachers here, this Richard Burns website, and just do a Google search for collaboration or just about any of these topics. If I could spell. He's going to come up with 100 different lesson plans to support collaboration at different levels. Same thing with Kathy Schrock's website. I remember we looked at it and looked at her site here. You can go in and look at just about any topic area, any grade level, and she's got an example of a learning experience that you could use for each one of these technologies, basically. And that's her thing, is teaching with technology. Same with Richard Byrne too. So you might have to do a little research. You might have to. I hope you're going to do some research. Well, you are going to do some research, because that's our next topic. But things like where is it appropriate to use a podcast? So digital storytelling, for example, is one of the things that Kathy Schrock has highlighted as her guide for educators on digital storytelling in the classroom. So, and then across the curriculum, she's talking about different subject areas, classroom ideas and practices. So in this case, digital storytelling could take a few different aspects, but certainly podcast and auditory files would fit quite well into that. I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of a complete system here too, because she's got all sorts of rubrics for evaluating that whatever task that you decide to choose. So TPAC, technological pedagogical content. Okay, let's go back to, I'm going to go back to my blog here now. And today I want to start sort of, as I said, we'll keep drilling down into each one of these activities, and I'll talk a little bit about each of the lessons that I'm expecting, and I'm going to watch your progress as you work on each one of these lessons. If you need particular help or individual help, or if you've got specific questions about them, don't hesitate to ask. If you're curious, somebody else is going to be curious too, so we'll bring them up. What I do want to move on to now, though, is sort of and we introduced the topic of theories, learning theory earlier, and talked about a few of the different sort of classic learning theories that were in existence. But remember some of the early theories of learning? mostly psychological theories, right? Who's B.F. Skinner? He's the guy that came up with behaviorism, right? What's behaviorism? What does that mean?
Why people act the way they do.
Well, it's one explanation for why people act the way they do. All these things, the theory, that's what theory does, right? It tries to, and it got so though after a while that he would pair this stimulus, which was in the actual stimulus was the food. That's what made his digestive juices work. But then he paired that with the bell. So every time they rang the bell, whether they gave him food or not, he would start producing saliva, start producing digestive juices. So Skinner said, well, learning is a process of pairing stimulus and response. So the stimulus is the food, the real stimulus is the food, the response is the generation of digestive juices, and the paired response is the bell. So every time I ring this bell, this dog salivates, whether he gets food or not. And once you've conditioned that response, and that's what it's called, conditioning, training somebody to associate the bell with food. So that he no longer salivated with the ringing of the bell. If you just rang the bell and never gave him any food again, how long would it take before he quit salivating every time the bell rang? So it took a long time to extinguish that response. So this was in the 40s, 50s when they were doing this theory. So they came up with this. That's what learning is. And education is a process of pairing stimulus and response. Well, we're a little bit more complicated than dog salivating. So that theory, it sort of still works to explain some things. And you could probably think of examples in your own life where stimulus and response get paired, and you associate something with a particular stimulus that leads to a particular response. And that could be, advertisers do it all the time, right? Or if you walk into, if you buy a house, a real estate agent, what's the first thing the real estate agent does when they show your house? Put cookies in the oven, right? Why? It's the smell. Usually we associate the smell of cookies cooking in the oven with something good, homeful, a nice home feeling, right? So they've conditioned us with a paired stimulus response conditioning. So I mean, that was kind of a useful theory. But again, it didn't really bear up when we started talking about humans learning. It was hard to demonstrate it with humans. It was hard to put a little probe into the middle of their brain to determine when I push this button, what happened. So it wasn't really testable. And that's going to get us, and just to mention a few of the other theories, and I've talked a little bit about this before too, cognitivism was another theory that's still sort of partially applied. Constructionism is another probably more commonly applied today, and it's probably the more common basis for our Manitoba curriculum. And constructionism basically says that we build our understanding of the world based on our previous experiences. What we've learned before, we kind of put that all together and we build our own understanding of reality. And social constructivism just says that we do that in the company of others. So when I learn things, I don't ever learn anything independently necessarily. I always learn in exchange with other people. So that notion of social construction is, so all good theories, all useful theories to a certain extent. Problem, of course, is that a theory, what's a theory? And I pointed this out before, it's a collection of related concepts that explains and predicts patterns of behaviors, right? So when we're talking about education and teaching, of course, we say it's a science-based enterprise. We're not just making this up. There's a solid scientific basis for what we do as educators. So that means that we've got to have a solid scientific base for that. So we start for that scientific base, we start from a theory that we think explains or predicts the patterns of behavior. And then we build models to work on that working theory, but all the time we're testing that theory to make sure it still works. Because it's possible that under some circumstances, if the context changes, or if new data is added to an environment or a situation, that theory no longer works to explain patterns of behavior. So in that circumstance, then we've got to either tweak that theory or abandon the theory for something better. So that's the whole process. And again, what we're doing, and as educators, it's important for us to understand that that's the process. That's what we're doing, and we're doing it with a scientific basis of some kind. So that means we need to understand a little bit about the science of teaching, science of learning, science of education. Are those the same thing? Maybe. Although they are it's hard to say that definitively, that teaching, learning, and education are the same thing. Because I can teach like crazy, but if you don't learn, has education occurred? Who knows, right? We got to test that. So when we talk about pedagogy, that's the individual science of teaching. And one of the expectations for you in this class, and I'll just go back to the course outline here and talk about the objectives for this course, was to develop a personal philosophy regarding the use of educational technology that integrates current theory and practice with personal experience, part of it that you'll be gaining in this class. Use knowledge of the philosophy, rationale, goals, and content of the Manitoba curriculum and the ICT continuum. Demonstrate professional responsibilities with regard to ICT use in education, including So part of it is, the expectation is when you're done this class, you will have a clearly articulated pedagogy that incorporates ICT into your teaching practice. So what is my personal science of teaching? What is my personal science of teaching with ICT? So the expectation is that. So we'll look at that. We'll go through that, and that's going to be part of the task of this when you do this presentation component, the last sort of activity for the class. I'm going to get you to do a presentation where you get a chance to think about, construct, build your own pedagogy that incorporates your understanding of ICT, how you're going to use ICT in teaching, and support it with some scientific background, a theory that you've demonstrated to yourself actually works. So that's going to entail doing a little bit of research, which means we've got to know what the theories are first of all, and then we've got to know how to examine a theory. And in this course, at this level, you're not going to be expected to generate a theory or test a theory, but you are expected to know what the theories are, and you're expected to kind of know what the status of those theories are with respect to education. Are they still accepted? Are they still useful theories, or have they been debunked? And that's kind of the task when you're reading academic papers, academic literature, is first of all, what theory is being produced here? What theory are we testing with this particular paper? Does this examination of this theory support the theory, or does it debunk the theory? And of course, with theories and with all knowledge, I guess that's the whole point of building theories and testing theories, is that we're creating knowledge and passing knowledge along, which is the task of teachers, right? That's your whole job, is passing knowledge along, whether that's content knowledge or the capacity to use information. That's kind of your task. So understanding how that works, critical thing. So we'll dip into some of this, and some of the things that I'm going to use and introduce you to in this class, I hope will be useful to you as you go into other classes as well. How many have to write a paper in your other classes? A few papers? Yeah, and I anticipate that down the road you're going to have to do more. So I'm going to show you a couple of things that actually make that pretty systematic. And let's start on it. Let's go to open a new Google Scholar tab and search for a thing called Google Scholar. Google Scholar, and this is another one of the marvelous Google tools that's free and works like a charm. So once you're in Google Scholar, you should see something like this. You can connect it to your own profile and use it, but then search for something. So let's look for theories of learning with ICT. What do you see? I get 291,000 results in 0.12 seconds. And what Google Scholar indexes is not just regular Google searches. These are all published articles. These are academic articles that have been, this is research that's been done into this particular topic. It's got some interesting capacities to it. And in this particular field, we only want usually the most current information. So stuff that they talked about in the 1950s or the 1970s or the 1990s or even the 2000s, with this field, the ICT, things are moving so fast that we want to have the most current knowledge. So Google Scholar makes that easy. On the left-hand side, you see it says since 2015. So if you click on that, it's going to change your search results to only academic articles that have been published about this topic, theories of learning with ICT, since 2015. So in the last 4 or 5 years. And when we've narrowed this down now, you still see that I come up with 16,800 results in my little search here. So a bunch of resources. Scroll through it, you can see the different things. Sometimes you can see down here where it says include patents and include citations. Well, maybe I don't necessarily want those, so I'm going to uncheck those. That'll narrow down my results a little more too. Not that much. Still, I got 16,800 results. So I'm only interested in published academic papers that talk about theories of learning with ICT. So you can customize your search for, and part of the issue with using technology and using Google, using this huge fire hose, is asking the question properly. Being able to ask the question properly so that you get the answer that you want, right? So in this case, you know, this is a fairly specific of learning, but could we refine the search even more? Let's talk about theories of learning in Manitoba. I don't know, I'm just guessing off the top of my head. Let's see what shows up. So that narrows it down pretty good. 1,040 results that were specific to theories of learning with ICT in Manitoba. So these are academic papers that have been published that examine theories of learning with ICT in a Manitoba context. So, yeah, people are thinking about it, looking at it, working at it. You can see some of the people, if you look through some of the citations here, you can see, what can you see? You might even recognize some names. I certainly do, of course, because I've been doing this for a long time. But after a while, you start recognizing some of the people who are, sort of the leading lights of developing technology-based education in Manitoba. And Canada, of course, is by extension. So we could actually, let's even change this again to Canada. How much do I get? So actually, there's quite a few more results there, 17,000 results there. So I'm still specifying my date range. I only want academic articles published about theories of learning with ICT in Canada, published since 2015, which hopefully is going to be the most current information about it. Topics like the use of ICT to preserve Australian Indigenous culture and language. Preliminary proposal using the activity theory framework. Activity theory. Oh, one of the theories that we're going to discuss. Activity theory. Entrepreneurial learning, peripherality and connectedness. Different theories. So each one of these is, again, because we specified that we're looking for theories, this is what we can use. So you can get set alerts to follow certain topics. So if you look on the side here, create an alert. So I want to know anytime something new is published about this particular topic, theories of learning with ICT in Canada. So anytime somebody now publishes something in an academic journal or a book, or one of these primary sources that we use for our academic work, I'm going to get an email notification that says something new has been added to Google Scholar's huge catalog of information about this. And you can have as many Google alerts as you want for that. So I routinely do it. What did I just get here? A couple of topics that I follow. Pechakuchka, what's I'm following? Google Scholar Alert, Digital Humanities is one of my areas. My postgraduate work, postdoctoral work is in digital humanities. So I've got a Google Scholar Alert sent to send me anytime somebody publishes something new about digital humanities. It sends me an alert, usually daily. And usually daily, I got probably 10 or 15 results that I can kind of just scan through. I can sort of do the real simple syndication thing. I can see basic, did this look like it would be something that I'm interested in? And if it is, then I will grab it and process it in another way. In another way that I'm going to show you right now. Go to another Google tab and look for Zotero. Z-O-T-E-R-O, Zotero. Anybody use this yet? Zotero? You're going to love me for showing you this, especially if you're going to be writing papers here or anywhere. So you're going to go look for Zotero, and you're going to have to download it, install it, and then set up an account. So this is another one of these things, free for basically personal use. Yeah, and then install the Chrome connector, because we're going to use it within the Chrome environment that we've been using for all along. It also works in Firefox. It also works in Safari if you're using those applications. But we've started with Chrome, so we'll use it with Chrome. So yeah, so you'll come to a page like this, says download Zotero, and for some of you it might be even already downloaded on your machines. But then also install the Chrome connector, and then register. So use your same old throwaway accounts here that we've been using for everything. And Zotero is another one of these things that you can have as many accounts as you want, depending on which email you use. So it takes a couple minutes. It'll probably send you a message to your Gmail, whatever mail that you use to set up your account. So you'll have to go back to there and just confirm that you're legitimately asked for it. But I need a hand getting going with this. Working?
No, it's not yet.
You have to do it. It doesn't. It's not going to work on your iPad. We don't have. Well, it's sort of working.
And they haven't sent me anything.
Oh, okay. So that they're good. All right.
I wrote them.
Ask you to.
I asked them.
Look at it. So Charlie. Okay. Open another tab here.
You got enter admission. You better start with them. Yeah, you better start with them. I won't let you.
Yeah, so Charlie just put in the page there, the first top one. Yeah.
I was able to download
And that's the one. Download. That one's gonna say download.
it. You got asked. I could look at Zotero.
Can't you remember the whole site?
That's the connector, and then the other one is the program itself. So download this one, and.
Oh.
And then as soon as you get them downloaded, in fact, you have to wait for the download to register.
Is there sign it?
And just use the first part of your account, this message that you use for everything else, right? And then the Gmail is used for this class as well.
That's what I'm saying, minus.
Yeah, run it, set it up. And then you'll have to,
That's
well,
okay.
the connector is actually going to be installed in the Chrome browser, so you don't have to really worry about that too much. What does that one say?
You are right.
Yeah. Is that do? Okay, so now you have to set up an account with them. So you're back into Zotero.
You can show me,
Did you add this to Chrome? Do that first, okay? Yes. Now you have to go back to Zotero itself, so we could set something.
You did for the board?
did you download it already?
Somehow just go back.
Now let me know, open this, so I just went down.
Obviously register.
It's right here.
Did
What's your Gmail? I'm in my Gmail.
Yeah, the first one.
So then that you open yet?
No. The one that you're using for this class.
Zotero or whatever it's called.
Then they're gonna send you a message to that.
Was I supposed here on search?
Okay, well, I did, and I added it to the Chrome later,
Okay, yeah.
but.
Did you download, did you
Did
download the
yours
program?
have this?
Oh.
Yeah,
no, I
yeah,
just did this.
Okay, yeah, so you have to have the
Because I
program and then
didn't know
connector between the program and.
You probably already have it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then set up an account with Zotero using your throwaway thing.
That's what I found.
No, did you go to Zotero? Okay, so you got the Zotero connector, so it's already installed. But did you download the Zotero program? Yeah. Yeah, so you download the program. So. And then the connector is what connects the program that's installed in your computer to your Chrome browser. Yeah, as soon as it's there, I'll tell you. But what you want to do is scroll up to the top of this Zotero and it says register.
Yeah, the username.
Again, use this same thing that you've been using for this class.
You get it?
Working?
This one was there already,
Oh, yeah.
that's the one?
Yeah. But did you make an account?
No.
Did you make an account on the website? But that's what it is today.
So do you want to have permission to use that? Just mark register.
Yeah, well, we'll take our break and when we come back, I'll show you how it works. And it might take a little while for it to send you the messages and get it accepted.
Oh, I think she needed the code on the video.
Oh, no, who needed a code? For
For her,
Skype? Okay, let me see if I got
it was
anything.
sent to you, but I don't know if it would have, if she got to resend it because they expire, eh?
I don't know, we'll see. 4912. That still works.
One, 9, 1, 2.
Yeah.
There's a temporary problem with this one, so just try again if you're confused with this message, try again later.
Okay, that's Skype, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Try again later. Anybody need a hand with anything? Getting going? So now it's our next step, which is more than 2 rules. One of those is preferences in it. Or just sync. Account that you just set up. Did it work, Laura?
So, once it's downloaded, do I open it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's open. So it's gonna set up another thing on your account. Yes, you say yes. So there, it's gonna be. It's got 2 things to it. One is the thing that's installed in your computer, and then it's in the cloud. Yep, you say yes, yeah. Yep. Yep. Let's keep going through there. As soon as you log in from your desktop, so you're already logged into your web version of this. Now you're getting your laptop version.
Yeah.
Now, you just,
Here?
yeah, there it is, that's the application itself. Yeah, did you install the connector? Okay, just install it.
Have you already done yours? You finished yours?
Downloaded?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then this thing here, do I log into your account or do I?
Yeah, so you
Like this
download
part?
it, you got set, okay, yeah, and you register an account? Okay,
It's done.
did it register? Did they send you an email message?
Right there.
Yeah, so you usually have to click on it and say yes. Yeah, to create a link. Okay, so they figured it out. Yeah, no, you're good, they just acknowledge that you set up an account here. So now I'll go back to Zotero, and if you download it, it'll show up on your actual desktop, so you can minimize everything here. Yep. And that too, in Chrome. So you can minimize this whole browser.
Oh, okay.
So it's an application. If you open that, that's what we're doing here. I'm just waiting until everybody gets this. And do Google Chrome. Okay, because we're not connect Google Chrome. So we do, yeah, so we didn't do it already. Just read now. Anybody else do that?
It's giving me
Good.
two options here.
Two options.
Firefox connector or.
You want to use Chrome. Oh, okay, it's probably already installed.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's just, you don't see it happening on there. You can actually go into your Chrome extensions and see. So remember where you get your Chrome extensions?
Here?
Here, and then it's right there, and then you go into extensions and more tools. Extensions. And you see the Zotero connectors are.
Okay.
So we're in business actually. If you want to go ahead too, I can show you. Go back to Zotero. No, go back to the actual the Z. And I'm going to just close the other way. Get rid of it. So go to edit. You go to preferences.
Did you get it?
Go to
Did you get it?
Yes.
No, this new account that you just made with that. That's it.
This one here?
The one you just made with Zotero?
Yeah.
That's it. That was Amber, right? And Heather, did Heather make it?
Yes.
That's what I thought, yeah. No Stacy though.
I know it is. See? That was just me having hot flashes.
Together towards a common goal. So that's what the intention of this one, design a lesson. How, first of all, examine yourself. How do I learn collaboratively? What
Yeah, come here.
So now that
Yep.
you downloaded that, where should you see it?
It'll be on your desktop. So now when you minimize your Chrome browser, for example, you can see, minimize everything. What else is there? Let's see, Here we're going to do next is going to edit preferences. Sync. And now we're looking for the account that you just set up as Zotero. Are we ready to go? Yeah, so I've got a few people going on this already too. When you're in Zotero, you will now have an application that shows up on your desktop that looks like the nice red Z. When you open it up, I've been using this for a long time, so I got it right full of junk, but yours is going to have nothing. I shouldn't say junk because it's all stuff that's important to me. But then when you went into edit and go down to preferences and go over and look where it says sync, it's going to ask you for the account that you just set up with Zotero. So for those that just came in, we just opened the Zotero application, and it's be a red Z on your desktop, another complete application. Go into edit and go into preferences. And then when you're in preferences, go to sync. And it's going to ask you for the credentials that you just set up, the account that you just set up with Zotero. So whatever you told them there, add that there. Yours is not going to have any data in it yet at all. So, but what we're going to do, I've just created a new folder here now that I'm going to call Pent when I'm collecting stuff for this particular class. Now we're going to go back to Google Scholar and open your Chrome browser, yeah, and go into Google Scholar and search for something. Well, in fact, you probably still, if you still have this search going right now, theories of learning with ICT in Canada, that's fine. But you should now see, because you've installed the Chrome connector in this, you should see in your toolbar up along the top here, right beside your little icon, your person icon, a little folder icon. And when you hover over it, it says Save to Zotero.
Do you have to click on a link first, or?
What's that?
You have to click on a link first, or?
No, just as I said, find that folder in your toolbar. And then if you've searched for something on Google Scholar, when you have Google Scholar open with this search here, and then you click on this, what this thing does now is looks for what's called metadata. And metadata is data about data. And that's what Google Scholar just finds. It finds the data about the data. So the actual data is the article, and the metadata is the reference, right? So when you're writing papers, of course, you always have to support everything you say with reference to published document of some kind. But if you're at this point, you should see something like what shows up on me when I clicked on that. It searched through all the entries that are on this page, and it presented me with this little set of choices here. So you can go through these things now, and if you've looked through the Google Scholar already, you kind of have an idea which ones you want to collect, harvest, or you can select all. So for this little exercise, I'm going to select all. And you can too, because you're just trying to put some stuff in your Zotero account. And then say, okay. And you see Zotero starts processing right away, getting all of the metadata about these articles that showed up in Google Scholar. Still haven't even looked at the article yet, but we've just looked at the metadata. And now we'll go back and look at Zotero. So now in your Zotero account, you should have, I've got a whole bunch of folders, but you should just have one folder, My Library, that houses all these resources in it. Anybody else get there? Yep. Let me just close that one here. Okay, so did you go to Google Scholar?
It's not even doing anything.
Did you go to Google Scholar? Good. Yeah, and then you see here. Yeah. And then select all of those, just because I put something into your account. See, so now if you minimize this or hit on the Zotero button at the bottom. Do you have LibreOffice?
No, so this cancel.
Yeah, just cancel that because it lets you make connectors between Zotero and Word or LibreOffice is another one.
You want to cancel this.
Yes.
Okay, and then.
So now just minimize this. So this is your Zotero account, your library. These are all the things that you just collected from Google Scholar. Okay, so that's your only base.
No, it's not me. I can't register with Zorro.
Why not?
It won't let me. It says the wrong information.
Wonderful. They're telling me no robot. I don't trust you anymore at all. Okay, did you go to Google Scholar? I think you got Zotero installed. Huh? It's already done, everybody's done it. Click on that. Or that, you can just go through that. Back to Chrome. And you're going to minimize this whole screen. Click on that, just minimize it. And find the zoom on the top of it.
You didn't want to go off through that Google Scholar?
Here you said learning about
Yeah.
ICT?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
Yeah.
you just click, oh, and then you go to your folder.
Word look.
Are you sure?
Okay.
My thing-
Oh, yeah, no. So actually, all you have to do now is
Series.
see that little folder.
See this thing?
Yeah.
And then you go here
Yeah.
Do I have one there?
All of those.
And select
We're just
and select
gathering a
all and
bunch
then
of stuff
press
to put in
OK.
there. Yeah, so you can say okay.
how come mine is not going?
Now go back and look and see what it's doing. It's collecting those and putting it into your library as a channel. Yeah. Well, it's great, yeah. So now when you go to Google Scholar, open another tab up in the top there. Tab plus sign.
See, I don't have that
And then
folder.
search for Google Scholar.
I don't have that folder.
You might need the Google Connector.
But I had them on
Chrome
there.
Connector? Okay, yeah, it's there. So go back to Google Scholar and you're actually in alerts. So you want to go back a page here. Yeah, there. Okay, so.
Oh, there,
you go.
okay.
And then select all, and then say okay. And then go back and look in your Google Scholar and you'll see what it shows up. Okay, yeah, now I'll search for it. Yeah, that's it. Just click that. You see the found. We're gonna sort of customize our search and make sure that it's since 2015. So we only want the most recent information. And now you see that little folder up there? Okay. And then say select all. Okay. And then go back and look in your Zotero now. So this is your, we'll just cancel that. And now you like this stuff in Google Scholar, and you put it in your Zotero collection. Good there? Sure. Yeah, did you get an account set up?
What did you do? First one,
Zotero? Okay.
look at it.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't want to
It's all good. See, I got like
You
this.
shouldn't have to even do any of that.
That's how it looks.
Just, I guess I did that.
And this is the other one, as I registered. So close this, close this.
You say next.
Yeah.
You don't want to, no, you don't. Next. And then next, yeah. Just to the next one.
So, on the desktop.
Okay, so that's okay, and did you add that to Chrome?
Okay.
It's already there? Okay, so now it's already in there. Okay, now go back to, look for on your desktop, minimize everything there. And you see the Z down there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I look like it's in this little couple of things in there, which is fine. Click on that. And then we go to this, go over to edit. And preferences. And sync. And put your, this account that you just created as a
That's a problem. Yeah, install that. Oh, sure. So now I'll open another tab in the top right here for the installer. Good, good. So. You've got the connector, and you go to a page like that, it should show up as a little folder. So just go back to the Zotero page. That's it, and install it. Yeah. We'll look at this information for extensions. Somehow it's not the extension. Go back to the Zotero page and just keep turning on to install it. Maybe close a few tabs. Close it to the Zotero tab. Close all of your tabs in the top there. That can close that one too. And then so now open another tab in the tab. And see if there's a term. No moves. And now go back and open up another tab up there. And you'll do the smaller. You can actually make another bookmark to Google Scholar on your toolbar by making life easier. Finding it all the time. Yeah, we're going to do a search here for theories of learning with ICT.
They're all on here
Probably when you signed it.
People in the stories earrings. That's fine. And then
Trying to go into the computer.
no, you see it's formal. You see any of that thing?
But I'm really signed in that old email on this.
No.
Probably why.
You see it on top of the keyboard, right beside the game icon. And it's going to ask you what do you want to do. We'll say select all. Is that what I
Slide it on that Gmail company. Not gonna show up.
The red sea.
I'll sign up on his Gmail.
Just trade it up. That one.
Do the same as the.
Did you synchronize your account? So we're going to start through the score. It's going to be terrible. That'll be signed right out, that'll sign anything. And we're just going to we're good. So we go to the Zotero thing down the bottom there. And we're going to go to edit. Purposes. And see. You just set up the values of Zotero. That's what we're doing. We're good. Now we'll find the scholar now. See here. It's going to say page on England and we select that. It's collecting all the metadata from each one of these things and putting the views of terrible. So now we've got this is terrible. You see your library now has those things. Oh yeah, just cancel it. Yeah, just cancel it. We found a PDF file or something. You can serve. Okay. So now you've got theories of learning with ICT. Specify when you get there. Okay, that's where we're all at. So it's just easy to get there.
It's supposed to be this.
They don't make a connection between Explorer and
That's right. How come it's not saying?
No, you see it.
You see where okay there, then you learn there's supposed to be a little down. There. Have a look over. So you
See, you have to change. Yeah.
Everybody set up? Zotero?
Go down. Then,
Okay.
and then go to this one.
We're using we don't see you using Chrome. Let's go looking at going to extensions and see if there are more tools. Extensions. Zotero not in there. So go back up to the top, it says Zotero. We'll find download. Zotero connected. Now, you see, yeah, except you want more than this. Just refresh this page. It's got a little circular arrow over it. Well, let's go see. Oh, no, there it is. There, now it's going forward. That's a quick on it. Oh, we got terms of terror. So just minimize that and go back to your desktop. Back to your desktop. Yeah, minimize the browser. Yeah. And get rid of that. And then let's see. And connected it. Yeah, no, you're there. Okay, so now go back to Chrome. Let's see, check it. Library. Yeah, so if we go down to Zotero now on the bottom again. See, you've got all those things. Okay, so that's where we're all at, I think. Everybody at this stage, we've got a collection now set up, and you can see the things that it's collected, the metadata, and it's organized in Zotero is organized in 3 different levels here. This is the folder level, so this is collections level. This is the individual or the collection of whatever's in this collection is here. And then if you click on each one of these things, it opens up on the right-hand side, it opens up the actual metadata about that particular document. So the one I found here, of course, is this one. Here's what I can see about this particular document. And if you open any of the documents in your collection there, click on it, look at what you see on the right-hand side. You're going to see the metadata about that particular article. And if you look through it, you can see what they've collected. they've collected information about the type of thing it is. In this case, it's a journal article. The title of this journal article is "The Use of ICT to Preserve Australian Indigenous Culture and Language, a preliminary proposal using the activity theory framework." Interesting, I'm going to read it actually. The authors are listed on here. No abstract, but so usually it collects the abstract. So it's a little description or the first introductory paragraph of what this article is about, what they found, all of the basic, a summary essentially is what it is. Where it was printed, what date it was printed, 2006, where you got it from, all these different information is possible. Click on another one, just check and see what's on those. So for example, this next one, using technology to accomplish comparability of provision of in distributive medical education in Canada, an actor network theory ethnography. Good stuff. See all the authors, 4 authors. Publication studies in higher education, still no abstract in this one for some reason. But you can see this is a journal. The journal is called Studies in Higher Education, volume 43, issue 11, pages 1900 to 1922. The date was 2018. So you can see all the details about this. Just keep looking through here and see what you can see from this group of stuff that you collected. You can start seeing here the different little icons on the left of that. This is the icon for a book, or sorry, a document. This is the icon for a book. So when I click on that, when I look over here, yes, it's the item type is it's a book. The title is English Language Teaching Today, Linking Theory and Practice. Authors are this. Again, no information other than the publisher is Springer, published in 2016. So all these things, this is information about metadata about these particular articles. So when you're writing a paper, what do? When you're using references, let's go and open up and you're going to your Google Drive and open a Google Doc, a new Google Doc. Remember how to do that? So go into Drive and New. And one of the things that you should be offered to be able to do new is, whoops, I don't want a folder. I want a document. Let's go on new Google Docs document, blank document. Call this document Zotero test, so you can find it again. I'm going to do print. I don't want to print it. Okay. So now, when you're writing a paper, what's the hardest part of writing a paper? Citing is a hard part of the paper. So, but when you're using Google or Zotero, what I can do is go into any one of these things. So I've written a paper and I want to cite this resource, for example. I'm going to right click on it where it says create bibliography from item. And you can follow along and do this as I'm doing this. And then whatever citation style your prof has asked you for. So I always use APA style 6th edition, but you can see there's hundreds and hundreds of different citation styles. Again, depends who you're writing for, which prof. Different profs have different requirements, different universities have different expectations. But let's say we're doing an American Psychological Association 6th edition, which is pretty common for anything to do with education, anything to do with social studies areas. Down here, I'm going to make it as a bibliography. Check that bubble off. And down a little further, you see copy to clipboard. And then say, okay. Now go back to your Google Doc and find a spot and call this references. And in APA format, that's what this is, not called a bibliography or a book list or anything like that. It's called references. So once you've got references and you found a spot for it, click down and click Control V What do you have? Perfectly formatted APA style citation. Is that true? Yes. Well, the reason I'm asking that is because APA is a little bit particular about things. For example, the title, when you're setting things in APA for title, the only words that get capitalized are the first word of the title and the first word of the subtitle. So in this case, yes. So this is this. Yeah. So teaching without a blackboard and chalk is the title. The subtitle is, after the colon, is conflicting attitudes towards using ICTs in higher education teaching and learning. So the first letter of the title is teaching, T in teaching, and the first letter of the subtitle is the C in conflicting. So this one is properly formatted. If you are actually using this in a document where the expectation is that you're using ICT or APA format, you might have to go through this and just make sure that it meets that requirement. So for example, this one doesn't. So issues, and I'm going to have to edit this, issues and impediments faced by Canadian. So proper nouns stay capitalized, of course. Teachers, no, I got to change that to small t. While, same thing. Oops. So just make sure that it conforms to actual APA formatting. Integrating pedagogical practice. So we're going to change that, and then practice. So now I've had to edit this entry to make sure that it meets APA formatting. But now that it's that way, I can go and create a bibliography from this item again. And yes, I still want to use APA format. I'm going to use, it's a bibliography entry that I'm going to put in. I'm going to copy it to clipboard. Okay. Go back to my Google document. And now I'm going to have to find the spot in it. So I forget what the first word of the author. And APA format is always organized by the last name, the first initial of the last name of the first author, right? So in alphabetical format. So if I go here, SV, that's right. Well, I guess I wasn't quite as careful with this, but I could still edit it from within here. So now I've got a 2-item reference list. And does anybody type references in? It's a pain, especially when you're doing APA format and you have to have this special little indentation, what it's called the hanging indent. So it's very painful. So if you can avoid doing that, it saves you a lot of time and effort. Let's go look at one more thing now. Is everybody able to do that? Ever? Comments? Okay, sure. Did it work? Sarah? Go to your Google Docs.
Restart because that one thing come up.
Oh, and then did it work after that?
Yeah.
Okay, so go to a Google Doc.
Drive, you right document now. Drive.
It's in Drive, yeah. There it is, yeah. Just Docs.
Links?
Yeah.
Google Docs.
Okay, so the title is called this terrible.
Well, that's
What's this title? It says untitled document. Yeah, change that. That's okay.
Yes.
Now go back to your Zotero application.
You need to get that done.
Okay.
Nope. You get,
Oh, right. What was that?
Okay, so you were able to actually select it. Oh, no, there it
I
is.
use APA 6th edition.
Okay, so just in the middle there, right click the thing in the middle, no, this one here. In the middle. Right click on the title itself and go,
Now go back to machine devices again.
yeah, great, good that from there.
Control V. The copy
You
of
want
this. Control
Go
V.
find the APA format, 6th edition, that's it. Should save it into the copy of clipboard. Find a
Do you
Google
want us
document.
to make another one?
Yeah.
Find this button down, just Control V.
Yo.
Ay, luminando, click one here.
Preferably formatted citation.
Right on.
Yeah.
Oh,
Does it work?
yeah.
What if you want to show us what's
It's-
Can you change it?
Yeah, and then just find a spot where, again, now, because you're doing one at a time, you're gonna have to sort them alphabetically.
But I don't know.
I guess it's the same one.
Is it the same? Okay, just, yeah, they don't want you to use paste, they want to use Control V. So now you gotta shuffle that and organize it so that it's correct alphabetically, right? But you want to check. I'll show you how to get around that too.
Yeah, I know.
Work?
Yeah.
Work?
The only thing I didn't do was
Challenge
type.
you. Did that work?
Yeah.
Anybody got that one? Those two? Which is,
Extend them on practice easier.
What is it called?
Okay, so we'll try and start again. Well, just give it a minute, give it a little time, and try it again. In half an hour or so. Sometimes Zotero is the same, all these things are the same, you have to get a whole bunch of signups from one IP address. We're good.
So it gives it, mira, man, I have periods, commas.
Go back to Google Scholar and collect some more. Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, we're good.
He's trying to reference.
How do you do that with the book?
A book that we're doing right now.
Oh, okay, yeah, so we'll find the book anywhere. You can find it, go find it even on Amazon. You'll find lots of different things. Just about anything that has metadata available. When you're on Google Chrome and you're searching for something, let's go look at a book in Amazon.com or Amazon.ca. Not necessarily, no. I'll show you one thing that you can do. So go into books. And find just about any title of book. I don't know. Let's go into, I'm going to go into science fiction and fantasy. Hopefully I won't get anything too rude. Here's one, Buzz Aldrin, John Barnes.
So you went to Amazon?
I just went to Amazon.ca and I'm looking for a book. So every time I open a book on here, here's this book, the Three Body Problem by somebody. I don't care what it is, but if you look up in the top here, now you see a different icon in that toolbar. So this is the Google connector that's now detected that it's a book. There's metadata about a book on this that it can collect. So it's not going to collect the book or a link or anything. Well, it's going to collect a link, but if you click on it, you'll see what happens. It's going to put it into, in your case, you only have one folder you're putting it into your library. For me, I'm saving it into a folder that I've called Pen 2019, and should be working. So now if I go back to my Zotero account and look in my collection that I just saved it to, so now that book shows up there. Same thing. So it's got all that same metadata that's been collected. So any place that really deals with primary sources, and that's when you're writing academic articles, you only want to use primary sources, right? These are original publications that are, especially if you're talking about academic work, it's got to be things that are published either in a book or in a journal, an academic journal. And that's why Google Scholar is kind of handy, because that's all they reference in there. They don't reference anything else, just academic academic sources. But if you go to things like Amazon.com, it's still going to collect all of the metadata, but it may or may not be a primary source that you could use in an academic paper. Still, you can search for whatever books you want. It works on just about any bookstore. It works if you go to the, I think if you go to the Brandon University Library site, you'll see one of the possibilities in there. If you're on searching using Google Chrome with the Google Chrome connector set up on it, and you go into Brandon University's library and you see a book on there that you want to save in your reference list, click on it, it'll go into your Zotero collection. So we'll actually review this, and I'll go through it in detail, but for the time being, this is sort of the big thing. Did you go back into the and get that kick off my recording too? No, I think it's still there. Yeah, is this a different? Yeah, so I've got a whole different set of resources now with a whole set of different metadata. So I'm just going to do this, and I'm just going to keep collecting things into here. Save to Zotero. I'm going to select all again, just because I'm trying to build something up in this demonstration library, and you can do the same. And then say OK. And now go back to your Zotero library now, and you should see all these things get added to this Zotero list again. So again, it's in, because you only have one folder now called My Library, you haven't sorted things out yet, that's fine. But we have this collection, and that's what they're actually called in Zotero. They call these things collections. So if I'm writing a paper and I've collected all my resources, say I'm writing a paper called PENT 2019, and I created a separate folder for PENT 2019. Everything that I use in that paper, I'm going to put into this folder. And then I'm going to go through them, and if they're not in my paper, I'll take them out of my folder. But then once I'm done my paper, I've collected all those resources in one folder, I'm going to go right-click on the collection. Now, last time we right-clicked on the actual item. Now we're going to go into the collection, and I'm going to say create bibliography from collection. And again, I want it APA style, and I want to put it in my clipboard. I say OK. Now I go back to my Google Doc. Where's my Google Doc? My test document. And actually, I'm going to get rid of these things because they're all going to be all in there already. So I'm just going to delete this. And now, when I paste this, it's going to paste that whole collection in there. So all of those resources that I had selected in that folder are all put in APA format with this hanging indent, this fussy little hanging indent, all organized exactly right with a date in the parentheses. Hopefully, if I've corrected things properly, I've got it so that that all my titles are properly formatted for APA style. In other words, capital letter on the title, capital letter on the subtitle, no other capitals other than proper nouns, and it's all alphabetically sorted. So again, how much skin would this save when you're writing papers? A lot of skin. So these three things, you get an idea, you get a topic, you go to Google Scholar and you say, well, I want to write a paper on, I don't know, a particular theory of learning with ICT. Go to Google Scholar and go through whatever they collect, and usually the most relevant stuff is at the top of the Google Scholar search, but especially when you got 16,000 hits though, you might want to refine your search down a little bit more. So the narrower you can refine your search, the better. And then just start collecting resources. So then looking through them, I can sort of see what this is about. Does this look right? Between theory and practice, importance of ICT. Yeah, that looks right. Look at the next one, impact of authentic learning experience with ICT on pre-service teachers' intentions to use ICT for teaching and learning. Yeah, that's exactly right. Next one, teacher perspectives on ICT, a learning ecology approach. Another theory. Yeah, that looks interesting. Yeah, so I want all those things. So, but I can go through this and sort, and I can see some of these I want and some of them I don't want. Right? So if I'm looking at this, that one I said I wanted, this one I said I wanted, I probably won't list books because I don't really want to find a book necessarily unless it's an important one. But I'm mostly interested in articles, reading articles. So when I selected those things, exploring the use of ICT and supporting dyslexic students' preferred learning styles. That actually looks very good. ICT application in education, an overview. Anytime you see an overview, that's usually a good place to start. Even if you don't use it, it usually points you towards a whole bunch of other stuff. So again, once I selected those, I say okay, and it's going to put it into my Zotero collection and be available in my file. Show you one more little trick before we go with Zotero. If you go into this in your library right now, you have, as I said, only one collection, but you want to start a new collection. So click on this new collection and it's going to say, what do you want? Say my paper, my ICT paper, or my ICT presentation. Actually, that's what this is going to be. My ICT presentation.
You can delete all this other stuff here?
No, you're going to keep it.
Really? I added some stuff in there.
That's fine. That's fine. So you're just making a new folder on this in your collections. A new collection is what it is, I should say, because that's in this they've called it collections. Now, when you click on that, there should be nothing in it, right? So you want to go into My Library, where all your stuff is, and now you want to put things in my paper or that my ICT presentation. So how do I get things in there? Drag and drop. That one I want. This one I want. That one I want. Now, when you've done that, you've created a collection of just the resources that you're going to use in this paper, or presentation in this case. And again, you can make as many folders as you want. You can organize things and shuffle them around. It still stays in your main collection. There's always going to be a version or a copy of this metadata in your main collection, but now you've actually made a copy of it in this particular collection. So again, once you decide you want to use this for the presentation, go and create bibliography from the collection. Yes, APA format. Yes, I want to copy to clipboard. It's a bibliography. That's what I want. I guess I could put another, let's try one more thing. We've got time for one more thing before we go today. When you're writing a paper, how do you do this? So for example, I'm going to write a paragraph. I'm going to introduce a theory of something, and I'm going to say, well, this guy came up with this theory. This guy tested the theory and found it was useless. And this guy tested this theory and found, yeah, it still works pretty good. What do I think? When I put this together and I think about it, I believe Jones rather than Smith. So when you synthesize ideas, that's how you put this together. So when I'm writing a paper, so let's say, I'll say Berzelius in 2018, Berzelius et al., I guess, because there's more than one author in here. And we use et al. After you've cited the first time. The first time you'd cite everybody, but the second time you would just do et al. So now I'm going to then put it in brackets, 2018. Right? So that's how you create an in-text citation. Jeez. 18. What's going on? Okay, so Berzelius said blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that was a bit painful. I can go back into Zotero now, though, and go find that from my, wherever this was, and I'm looking for Blazeth. What was it? Blaze. Yeah, I've forgotten already too. Find it in here. I could do a search. Do you see it where it is? Yeah, it's down at the bottom. So now instead of creating a bibliography from the item, but I don't want now a bibliography, I want a citation. So it's going to be an in-text citation. So I click on that and I say, okay. Go back to my text wherever I'm typing it. And instead of this now, I paste in this. So it's actually made the full proper in-text citation. In the case of this one, of course, the first time you cite it, you've got to say all the authors. But it's created what's called an in-text citation. So I could say, in this case, I could say some authors suggest. And of course, every time you say that, you have to back it up, right? So you have to, what do you mean? Which authors? Well, in this case, Bezlaise, Dolek, and LeMay, 2018 are the ones that said it. So you've created a citation. The other thing about that's characteristic of APA formatted in-text citations is that instead of using and, they use this little symbol. What's this little symbol called? Remember that? Ampersand. Yeah, it's called the ampersand. In text, if you wrote this in text, you actually use the word and. In the reference list, it's the same. You use the ampersand instead of and. So these are just funny little quirks of APA formatting that it's a pain. But if you use Zotero, Zotero figures out most of that stuff out for you. Just have to make sure that you verify that you've gone through this and looked and made sure that it's meets those requirements. That's the one, the stickiest one is this capitalization of the titles. So make sure you go through those and usually do it in your Zotero collection. So that you might use that reference in a whole bunch of different papers. So you want to make sure that it's correct in your Zotero application so that every time you use it, it doesn't, you don't have to correct it in your text. So everybody able to do that? Create a collection in your Google Doc. That seemed like it might save some aggravation. It worked. Worked. So you're going to get 2.
Yeah, because that's always, and then I lost track.
Okay, go back to Zotero there. So did you create a folder? Yeah, you're just going to get my ACT presentation.
That's what I did.
Yeah, okay. Did you put some things in it? Okay.
I only put 2.
Oh, okay, so you can just put a few more. You got the right idea. That's what we're doing. It worked.
It worked, but how do I look at it to see what's in there?
So just click on that collection.
I did, but there's nothing.
Don't click there.
Oh,
Maybe you added everything to it.
I did add everything to it.
Okay, well, that's fine.
These are the ones I had.
Oh, that's in there, okay. If you go back to my library. Okay, so you basically put your whole library into that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. But if you want to make a bibliography from that, just right click on, go to my ICT presentation, right click, and create bibliography, selection. Yes. And go back to the document. And just get rid of that stuff there. And do references. That was done. Down, and then we go B.
I have 5.
I missed
Yes,
Yeah.
Back to Zotero.
Did you do this right? Like the citation?
Right click
That's
on
what I have.
the presentation.
Oh, right click on my
Yeah.
references.
Create
So where's my
bibliography.
citation?
No. Citations or, yeah.
Yeah, you want bibliography.
Okay, I thought it was citations.
Yeah, well, on this you want.
Okay.
Get rid of that.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Formatting. Work. So you want to create my library? So that little
Here's my idea.
The citation for that one off your doc.
for my presentation.
Control C site.
I cited the ones that we just did the one,
You got 5 of them, or that's only one?
but I didn't do these ones.
Right, no, you don't use all of them. It's all use
So
them.
now,
Right,
instead of me
citation
holding
and
this one,
then
I'll
citation.
go back to my library.
So right click,
Yeah.
Now just click and drag into my presentation. Of course, you.
citation,
Like a teacher, maybe
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
and then AP style,
And then.
copy the report, okay,
And then with the docs.
Do our page.
my docs.
Now open my
It's the
presentation.
same one as this one on top.
Okay, go back to this one.
Okay, now right click on that.
Over here on presentations. Narration.
Create video.
Okay,
And now you can see this, it says you want to see it to clipboard.
Paste it again.
Now go back to Google.
See, that's how it would be in your end text when you're citing the
When
quote,
you're doing a paper.
Open the.
or your quote, and then that's
document.
where your quote came from. Then that's your reference.
This, please.
So then we're going to go ahead and go through that.
so how do I save this then?
Just, but you're not done yet. Go through that.
It's in your drive, it's already saved.
So we don't need to save it?
Sorry, not.
Out.
We don't need to save that?
If that's already on your documents, it automatically saves.
But what he showed me is you out. Create reality. He wants to see all those.
People in title just say.
I only did once.
He wants to see all those on that page.
So it says.
They want it control V, who is.
You want to say, just so terrible, demo,
Control V.
and just pick that body of this message, and maybe that,
Yeah.
in the body of the message.
But that's like things you want to do is.
So remember that all that, just control.
She just click
So Carol,
to,
All those things.
and then she click
one of these.
one of your, ICT. And then
Yeah, so that's about reference.
Yeah, I right click, and then we go down to PNG, also
Say things in your pocket.
yeah.
And then that citation, that's for your.
So,
That's it?
Model.
Oh, okay, well, if I could link to it, well, okay, so go back to the Google Chrome again. or something. And go to Google Chrome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just saved on documents.
I like the one where,
so that Amazon thing was messing
That,
with
no,
that black.
that was just
they were
like,
asking.
Okay.
Just asking.
Here, I've never seen that. He was doing it as well.
I was making my blog.
I don't know, let's go back into the, did you try and uninstall the extensions?
That's just a stick.
Extensions. Yeah, we're done for the day there, so unless you want to hang out for some help, that's fine. And then,
Yeah.
move it.
I'm gonna need it.
Okay.
But not right now, when you're done. And then these are way better here. See, the way I have them.
No, we can leave that for the time, just minimize it and go back to,
No more setting my grandson.
Did you want me to?
Yeah.
you couldn't get that on here? Well, see, on the address folder, save the,
Oh, is it this? I tried, it's,
Summit on.
try.
Like one in the
Sorry, Jenna.
Well, let's leave it and try tomorrow again. Again, as I said, you're on the right track, you're doing everything, maybe I'll have to try and settle those.
There's your library, so you're pressing collection, and then you pick it, my ICT, and then if you have other ones,
Okay?
now you have to do something.
No.
okay.
One.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah. Got lots of
So
stuff.
open a document on your.
This one here?
Very good, good stuff.
You did that
So I
one
can see
already.
you've got
I
this.
did
in
this one
your
already, the
program.
one you did there.
Yeah, that's the one.
Four times.
Oh, that's it.
Just
That's
click on.
it.
So now you have
This
to
is
go
when
through this
you're-
one.
That's the one you did.
Your index, your body, and this is your last page. That's it.
You're supposed to upload it?
No, it's just save it on your, it'll save on your documents, on your drive automatically.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
You don't have to press no save button?
Nope. It saves all your edits.
Yep. Does it work for you?
On your.
Oh, on my office hours?
Right?
Yep, if you're on Skype, if you're on meeting on Skype, just, whatever time. Well, I don't usually come here until office time at 5 o'clock.
Oh, okay,
Otherwise, I have another life.
okay.
This is only a part-time project, but I'm willing to meet on Skype. So that usually works for the group.
All right.
You got a question? Okay.
Yeah, I got some questions.
Yeah, no problem. That sounds good. Work?
Yeah, then, where is it? Yeah, I've got a question, I'm on my blog right now.
Okay.
But guys, we're moving my feet.
Okay, so,
But, it's about, my lesson plan.
okay, well, no, go ahead.
How long are you here for? 7 minutes?
I'll stick around, yeah. So, I'll let you.
Yeah,
You have a question?
I'm just trying to get everything out.
Okay, good. Well, I'll stick around for a while. Sure. Now, did this work?